openness to coaching and feedback is probably something I want to encourage in myself and anybody else listening, because I find it very easy to think, no, no, I'm way more workable than everyone else out there. And this all sounds great, but no one else out there is going to be caring or considerate or is going to want to even like, I'm going to show up to the tennis court. I won't be that good. And the person on the other side, they're just going to be sitting on the floor looking away. And like, there that and I want to go back to the fact that you mentioned your friends. They said, I'm leaving this place to go to another social media platform because I don't want to interact. They've completely cut off the conversation, right? So what happens when we take that initiative to be better at conflict resolution, but you're still looking out there and it seems like no one is even wanting to lift a finger?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really counterintuitive about kind of conflict resilience is we often will, a lot of the kind of the yeah buts that we have about it will often be kind of looking at the other side of the table, like the people that they're the problem. And I think to Bob's point, we actually would say that you really need to start internal first. And that's actually one of the hardest things is that you do have to do some of your own internal work, whether it's around identity or it's around kind of your history with conflict or managing like mental health, right? There are some people who have some mental health issues that relate to kind of feelings of threat or kind of real fear just interacting with other people. And so that work, that internal work is just so important before you can really become much more skillful at managing the interaction across the table. Because we would argue that conflict resilience is applicable regardless of the level of skill of the person across the table.
One of the things I would also say, because I think this question, and it's something I've heard a lot, right, is well, I don't have a partner on the other side, right? And there's something about it that is, it's very easy to explain away the problem or externalize the problem. It's also the case, though, I think, that there are ways around that. So, and we kind of discussed this a little bit in our book. We actually have an example in there about there are two siblings and you're fighting over a political issue. And one
Like that never
continually
happens.
like that never happened, right? Yeah. And what the way it's set up kind of is one does a very early exit all the time, making the other thing like, what's wrong with you? Like, you either A, realize you're defeated, so that's why you leave, or you're no fun, or you don't like me, or you're just a person of bad faith, right? Um, but the conversation to get things on track sometimes is, and this may sound very meta, but just in the kind of coaching work that I've done can be really powerful, is can we have a conversation about what makes the conversation hard? Which is right, very meta, right? But like I've observed this, a resistance, or I've observed this, and framing it from that perspective of I've observed, and here's the behavior, and what's your reaction to that? And now you still may get the same avoidance, right? I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. I think more often than not, you don't get that. You might not get the most skillful and amazing answer. You might even get something like, this is weird. But this is weird is still an invitation to engagement. And if part of if part of your complaint is they're not engaging, that is engagement. And that's a first step, right? And sometimes it could be the negotiation first is, what are the ground rules and expectations about how do we talk about this? Not just agree to disagree, right? Because agree to disagree to me is a shut. Let's agree to disagree.
I hate that statement.
So there are workarounds. All right, what you say?
I hate that statement. Agree to
Me
disagree.
too.
It's such a cop out.
It's such a cop out. And I mean, maybe because, one of my personal evolutions, I mean, I think many people who do conflict resolution work, this is like a dangerous thing to say, but there's not probably that many conflict resolution people listening to this, right? Like what draws them to it is their own like inability to handle it. I mean, I would put myself in that category. And also being somebody who is pretty avoidant. And I think the more work I've done in this, and certainly I think this book, I mean, to poor Joelle's detriment, um, I've been like an invitation. Sometimes I feel like I'm a conflict creator. I mean, that's not fair, but even as a mediator, right? I have found that if people are saying, "Oh no, we're on the same page," and you're listening, and you thought like, this person said A, and this person said, A minus, and they're saying they agree, but I know they don't agree. The most convenient thing to do would be like, fabulous, I'm glad we're done with that issue. But that is a mistake, right? And so often what I'll say is, I know you guys say your agreement, but frankly, I'm hearing something different here. And so sometimes I find myself in the role of bringing up the conflict more. Um, And I think that's a shift, a personal shift that I've had, both from the study of this, the practice of this, and the teaching of this over, a long time.
And to be clear, bringing up the conflict is a good thing. Like, you want to bring up the conflict because that's going to lead to kind of better creativity, people being more authentic to each other. It's going to lead to better kind of productivity. It's going to lead to better cohesion together. Because if you just say, agree to disagree and then kind of move on, knowing that you don't really actually agree, it's going to come back. It's going to come back and bite you in the end.
Yeah. And it's almost always the case that the kind of anxiety or fear about engaging the conflict is worse than actually engaging it. And so once we start to realize that, and this is another, I don't know why I'm calling it an insight, but it's a personal insight just from a long, many years of coaching people and having people then come back and say, yeah, that was like, it didn't go as I thought, but here's the one thing for sure. It was not nearly as bad as like all of the disasters I had planned in my mind. And then getting them to encode that, so that the next time the story for themselves is, it's better to engage this now authentically. And as Joelle said, even when at the end of the day, we've had a really hard conversation, we're still pretty in strong disagreement on A, B, C, D, and E. There's a connection there. And I would say, maybe hearkening back to your maybe first question, Jason, about just like, how did we come to some of this? Like for me, I gave you half the story, which was what I was observing at Harvard Law School. The other half of the story is work that I was doing with an organization and continue to do with an organization called Seeds of Peace, which does work in a number of conflict zones, but primarily and historically between Israeli and Palestinian young leaders. And traveling every year for many years to East Jerusalem and working with these people. And I have to say, like at the end of their work together, they don't have much agreement on the issues, but it has utterly transformed the way they tell the story about the other, their experience of the other, their ability to cooperate in a whole bunch of other domains. And boy, the gains to conflict resilience there, if more people had that, are pretty darn high. And so to see that in a context like that, and then to see that capacity actually declining in an American context, at an elite law school, gosh, that troubled me, right? And then to see the way, we see more and more polarization, both in the United States, but across the world, and saying like, we have some work to do here, people.
Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.